the Brazilian president is starting to sort of ramp up and put pressure on various groups and constituents to deliver certain goals for Belém. I can't say much about it except to say that we're concerned about what that means around finance, forests, carbon markets, and also and what that means in terms of censorship on the road to Belém. Other key areas are around technology negotiations, where language like indigenous peoples' technologies are being put forward by Costa Rica and the EU. We don't even know what that means. In Article 6 negotiations, there were many workshops last week. Article 6 is now being implemented. 6.2 is rolling out. 6.4 has some standards that still need to be agreed on throughout the rest of this year. And again, like I pointed out, 6.8 is a contentious space. We've never seen that before. Red Plus is listed across all of the articles of Article 6, and we're very concerned about that, what that means and how that plays out in many different spaces. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to address very specific issues in more detail. And I thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for that, Tamra. I need to make a correction. So La Via Campesina is on, but they're in a Zoom room. They'll be connected. And I also forgot to mention that this is also another sister alliance, which is Climate Justice Alliance is part of the Sister Alliance Network as well. So our next speaker will be Kelvim. And I think Kelvim has prepared a presentation. We have 5 minutes, Kelvim, por favor.
Thank you so much. All right. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Francisco Kelvim. I'm from the movement of people affected by dams from Brazil, and also part of MAR, the international movement of people affected by dams and mega projects. We are here in Bonn, but also we were here these few days, connect with many organizations, particularly in Switzerland and here in Germany, grassroots organizations to get involved in that process of building first the international meeting of people affected by dams that we will have in November before COP30 in Belém do Pará, and after and second, we are here to building that process of the People Summit, and it's the reason why I'm here today. We believe in our organizations that we are living in a moment of many crises, economic, a food crisis. The world just talked about war, about guns, and we believe even with this moment that we are living, that is very, very hard to talk about climate, democracy, participation. We think if we have a process of mobilization during this process of COP30 in Belém, we can really in that moment have a chance of change the history of climate. It's very, very hard, but we are building that process, and we are in almost 2 years building that process of the People's Summit, and now we have more than 100 organizations around the world, organizations of all continents that are involved, engaged in that process. An independent, autonomous process of mobilizations of the people for real change, not just in climate discussion, in the climate negotiations, but a real change that for us, it's changed the economic model that we have today. So, and we have some principles. We are building a space parallel to the COP 30, but not part of this. But we have a strategy of advocacy inside and outside. Many organizations that are engaged in the process of building the people submit are in copy. So the idea is this process of mobilization pressure goes to COP30, to the Brazilian government in the same time to the COP. In the global scope, bringing together different parts of the world to that process and build what we're called a platform for wide range of political topics and autonomous actions with some shared political principles that we have. We have some axes that are very, very important, and we think all the debate that we will have, everything that we will building in the next months until COP30 will be guidance by these convergences axis. The first one, leave territories and territories, um, popular food sovereignty. The second one, historical reparations, combat environmental racism, false solutions, and corporate power. The third one, justice, popular and inclusive transition uh, um, against oppressions for democracy and people's internationalism, justice cities and vibrant urban peripheries, and the last one, popular feminism and women's resistances in the territories. So this strategy of advocacy will be guidance by this axis that we will convergence building convergence in the next months to that process. And the idea is we have all this process happen in Belém to 12 to 16 November there with a process of mobilizations that the movements of Brazil, the organizations are trying to build a huge process of massification, and we have something like 10 to 15,000 people involved in that process. So we are here, invite everyone to building that process together with us in that moment, not just in Bonn, but in the next months that we have ahead. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kelvim, for that important information. We're going to move to Christine Nabwami from La Via Campesina, who's going to be talking to us via the internet. So, Christine, please. Christine, are you ready to for your 5-minute presentation?
Yes, I am. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry, I hadn't muted. Yeah, I
Oh.
hadn't muted. Sorry. Okay, my name is Christine Nabwami, and I'm a small-scale farmer, the indigenous folks from the indigenous communities, a member of Eastern and Southern Africa Small-Scale Farmers Forum here in Uganda and La Via Campesina. So my take today is to talk about what indigenous communities and small-scale farmers should look up to as we proceed as we walk the road to Belém. What should we put into consideration? And first, I would advise my fellow indigenous folks that from the discussions we've had in the first week of Bonn, this is the take that I have as we await for what is coming on in this second week. In the first place, we have to pay close attention to the financing, the implementation of the climate finance funds. That is the proposal to do the implementation through debts. Since COP30 is being framed as the COP of implementation, and discussions in Bonn are laying groundwork for how that much of what is being proposed as being innovative and blended finance translates into debt instruments pushed by institutions like World Bank, IMF. So we should question who benefits from this model and who bears the burden, because still they are making it a profit venture, which they call projects, and the profits are getting back to them, the big institutions. And we, the indigenous communities, are going to bear the burden because we have to give in what we have to ensure that we reach the climate justice that we demand. Then secondly, we talk about the carbon markets and the false solutions. This is currently with us, and we have to make sure that its operationalizations, as they are being stated in Article 6 of the carbon markets, be finalized and technical standards being discussed. These markets are giving room to polluters to offset emissions rather than reducing them through the land grabs, the monoculture plantations, and the RED schemes. The land grabs come in a way that they bring us the carbon market as a project, and here we have to offer land on which the planting of trees have to be done. This we've done, but still we have to provide more land. So we have to pay much attention on how our land is going to be taken away from us through a project that is not going to benefit us so much, since it is a long-term project. Then secondly, the monocultures, these are currently with us in projects that they bring to us and they end up not being for us because we are being paid literally very small money to help us go through the financial needs that we need as homesteads, and still they are still taking it that it is profitable and a good venture, but not working for the indigenous communities. And then thirdly is the RED scheme, which is among the nationally determined contributions. And these ones are within us, but they are not inclusive of farmer voices, so they are not yet for us. The third thing that we should take into account is the debts and the land appropriations. And they are continuing to promote the debt for nature and the debt for climate swaps, which may sound green, but often involving the northern countries and financial actors gaining control over land and resources in the global south. So these schemes become a new wave of land grabbing in the name of conservation. And we have the real conservation measures that we are doing as small-scale farmers, and we are promoting the implementation of agroecology because these are the real solutions that work for us. But the global south, the global north solutions are not beneficial to us because they come with a cost implication that impoverishes the indigenous communities. Then the need for real solutions and community controls. Communities, we, the indigenous communities, should demand direct and non-debt-based financing, which should be rooted in the climate justice issues, the sovereignty, and the real climate solutions. And here we are talking about agroecology, which we are happy has been mentioned, and we are awaiting the adaptation, the territorial governance, and the protection of commons. So the fight should be for the farmers, not against the farmers. And here we are happy that at least the speakers are realizing that as we walk the road to Belém, negotiators have got to hear and put into consideration that we need the indigenous communities and folks present at Belém so that our voices are heard. And this organization is the People's Summit is trying to help organize us to see that at least our voices come through the different actions. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Christine. And I was just updated that Christine, if you could put your mic on mute. Thank you. I was just updated that Eriel will not be able to join us for this, and from our sister network up in Canada, the Indigenous Climate Action. Sorry. We're gonna move on to listen for 5 minutes from Chief Ninawa. And he's gonna be getting translated to, so we're gonna try to do the translation in the best manner moving forward.
Tarde ainda, né? Bom, boa tarde. Eu sou o cacique Ninawa, sou Huni, sou do estado do Acre, da região amazônica do Brasil. Você vai anotar?
Should we do
Yeah.
like this or
So
everything? And then-
as he says, then you can repeat what he says, please.
Good afternoon. I am Chief Ninawa Onikuing from the state of Acre in the Amazonian region of Brazil.
Vou fazer uma avaliação de tudo que tem acontecido durante essas 2 semanas. A gente fica um pouco meio que confuso, porque primeiro são palavras muito técnicas, são temas diversos e também em alguns momentos não se tem tradução, como a pauta da transição justa, por exemplo.
I will make an assessment here of everything that's been happening in these 2 weeks. We get confused a lot of the times. There are very technical terms, many diverse themes, and in some moments there is no translation, like with the just transition negotiations, for example.
Mas é muito claro que há muitas coisas que ainda está em dúvida, tem coisas que têm avançado nas discussões, nas negociações,
But it's very clear that although there are many things that are still being disputed and confusing, there are other things that have been advancing in negotiations.
com a realização da COP30, fica muito claro também a, a tentativa de avançar nessas negociações, porque a COP30 tem trazido muitas expectativas, né, dentro das negociações, principalmente por ser no Brasil, ser na região amazônica.
With COP30 coming up, it's also very clear that there's an attempt to advance in these negotiations because COP30 has brought big expectations, mostly for being in Brazil and for being in the Amazon.
Mas eu acho que tem uma coisa que ainda não está levando em consideração dentro das tomadas de decisões, que é a participação realmente sendo respeitada a presença de comunidades locais, de povos indígenas.
But I think there's still something that is not being considered in the decision making, which is the true respect for the participation and the presence of indigenous peoples and of community leaders.
Quando a gente faz essa reivindicação, sempre temos de resposta dos negociadores que é uma negociação entre governos. Então, isso não cabe que as comunidades locais ou povos indígenas estejam tomando assento nos espaços de decisões.
When we make this demand, we also hear from negotiators that it's a negotiation between governments. So it's not the place for indigenous peoples or for local communities to have their demands sitting in the decision-making table.
Também há muita justificativa de que a implementação de muitos programas, ou, por exemplo, de recuperação diária, isso falado por representante dos negociadores, né? Que ainda não é efetivo o repasse de recurso desde Glasgow, e aí isso tem dificultado nas ações do governo, mas a gente sabe que essa questão dos financiamentos tem só aumentado, mas sem efetiva para fazer implementação com resolutividade com as mudanças climáticas.
There's also a lot of justification that we hear that the implementation of many programs, for instance, reforestation programs, that the relay and transferring of resources is still not as effective since Glasgow, which has made it difficult for governments to implement these programs. But we know that climate financing has, in fact, made it more difficult for communities to access these resources.
E especificamente voltado para a organização da COP, que é no Brasil, que é na Amazônia, mediante todo o esforço que a gente tem presenciado nas discussões para realizar uma conferência diferente, tem acontecido ações contrárias, por exemplo, o leilão de bloco de petróleo na Amazônia. Isso está totalmente ao contrário do que se tem discutido em relação a reduzir, né, os impactos das mudanças climáticas, está colocando a humanidade em ameaça.
And particularly about the COP30 organization, which will be in Brazil in the Amazon, we see all of the efforts to make it a different conference. But at the same time, there are actions that are totally oppositional to these intents. For example, the auction of oil blocks in the Amazon that's been happening this past week, which is completely against all of these good intentions, and it's actually putting all humanity at risk.
E me deixa mais preocupado quando a gente está nas salas de negociações que houve, por exemplo, a exemplo do Brasil, os negociadores do Brasil dizer que se orgulhar da metodologia de recuperação de áreas degradadas com plantio de eucalipto, por exemplo, outro tipo de monocultura, e falar isso com muito orgulho numa mesa de negociação, para a gente deixa muito triste, porque não se contextualiza realmente qual o problema que está sendo instalado, em vez de dizer que está fazendo essa recuperação. Obrigado.
And I'm more concerned when we are in negotiation rooms and we hear, for instance, Brazilian negotiators say that they're proud of the reforestation of areas with the methodology of eucalyptus plantations, because that takes absolutely out of context and doesn't consider everything that we actually need to recover those lands and those areas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Ninawa, for your participation in this. It's very important to hear from folks on the ground as well, and folks that are in harm's way and are living the impact of climate distortion. I wanted to take the opportunity really quickly to just talk about two things in regards to just transition. We've been sitting in meetings around just transition and dialogue, and several things had come up yesterday that we at some point thought were progress, which included the no markets approach in the dialogue, and at the same time human rights, women's rights, and indigenous peoples' rights. Sometime in the middle of the night or in the afternoon, late afternoon, several countries came back. Actually, it was around 5 or 6 in the afternoon, and said that they could not move forward with such things in the agreement. So we did a lot of rallying in the morning and last night, and I think what resulted was that they would put the language back in, but that they would punt it towards Belen, and not to mark up any more language until the next process in the next iteration. And the false solutions, nature-based pieces as well, are still in it. That's correct. I'm being coached here. So, so again, I think it's important to understand that it's you back at home are crucial to this. You're our base. You're making the reason that we're here important. And at the same time, it's our communities that are in harm's way, all of our communities. And all of our issues are in harm's way. And what happens here in Bonn gets institutionalized and moves forward, but it just gives us a little bit of an understanding that this is a tough road, and there's more climate profiteering happening here than climate fixes. So I want to open it up for at least 5 to 7 minutes of questions and answers. So if folks have questions that are out there, please put your questions in the chat. Now, I know folks back home aren't shy, so we're still waiting for you.
But as we wait for the folks, it is too absurd. It is too absurd that happened, because now our fight has been punched on. If they are standing on the women rights, then, and the women are the main custodians, then what are we, the indigenous women, supposed to do? What are we supposed to say? That is why we are always asking that, why do they make closed meetings and never involve the indigenous people who have the real stories to tell? It is of much importance that if we told the stories ourselves, it would make much sense to them, instead of devising solutions and making so many wording and brandings at the international level and in boardrooms, yet we who bear the burden are left out of the discussions. So that was so absurd of the negotiations. Thank you for the update.
Thank you, Christine, for that. And if I don't get any questions here soon, then I'm going to ask the different folks that spoke to just give us some closing comments in 1 minute.
Okay.
We do have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is about degrowth. Has that been part of conversations?
No, it has not. I was going to come back with some kind of smart aleck comment, in the sense that the only thing growing here is money. But finance as usual. That's the growth. And in regards to degrowth, that hasn't been something that's been talked about. And then it says, what's the next question? I can't read it here.
It says, what looks like will be the big issues going to Belém COP30? What might be the unresolved and big fights in Belém that we need to anticipate?
Yeah, go ahead, Tamra.
Hey everyone. So everything that we have spoken about in this webinar goes to Belém. So everything from forests to the just transition fight, Article 6 implementation, RED Plus related to forests. RED Plus is reducing emissions from forests, from deforestation and forest degradation, plus being conservation, agriculture. All of that is inside of Article 6. And so there's a plan to sort of amplify that with a new web-based platform or a new platform, and synthesize that across the board. We know that the Brazilian government is planning on launching the Tropical Forests financial facility, which was the Forever Fund. And that's hugely controversial for a multitude of reasons. If you look in the webinar chat, and if you're watching this after the fact I've put in the Road to COP fact sheets. And so again, on is because we learn about what the key issues will be when we get to the COP. So on the negotiating side, we started out by sort of running through what all of those key negotiating areas are. But on the social justice and the social movement side, we've had our friends from the from the Mar and the indigenous peoples who've spoken on this webinar outline some of the key areas for them. And so as we move forward, it's essential that we come together as well as a sister alliance and discuss these crucial issues so that we arrive in Belém strong, and also find ways to support a lot of the Brazilian groups on the ground who will be there for many of us that won't go, but to support them and their struggles and their ongoing struggles. I think another thing to remember is that COP30 is not sort of an ending point. COP30 is really a space for us to strengthen movements so that we can move forward, because the climate crisis does not end in COP30, and in many ways it's just beginning as the UN continues to be a space that fails indigenous peoples, that fails social movements, that fails communities most impacted by climate change in the global South. And for us as so-called civil society or social movements and activists, women, academics, people who see through the facade of the UNFCCC to come together, strengthen our movements, and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamra. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move forward with just some quick closing comments from folks. So I'll have Francisco Kelvim do a minute of closing comments.
Thank you so much. I think one of the biggest challenges we will have in that COP, one of the big disputes that we will have there, will be this the biggest companies, corporates, trying to kidnap the agenda of COP30. For them, they want this COP being a COP about forests, about promote false solutions. I think our fight, our mobilization has to be about real progress in the agenda, justice transition, adaptation, finance, and I think we're just building this process with a huge process of mobilization there. So thank you so much for the invitation, and we in Brazil expect you with energy, with the happiness of the people of Brazil to build that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvim, for that. And so again, I think just in closing, because we're being asked to evacuate the room because the whole UN is closing down, it seems. But we did have until 5 of. So I just want to mention, and maybe just here, I'm gonna take that prerogative and say we got 5 minutes. So, Chief Ninawa, por favor, 1 minute, un minuto para cerrar, un comentario cerrar.
Só para dizer da importância desse momento, de a gente dialogar, eu acho que isso tem que seguir fortalecendo entre os movimentos sociais organizados.
Just to comment on the importance of this moment for us to dialogue, to talk with each other and converge. And we have to keep strengthening and take advantage of this momentum going forward.
E também de focar num pensamento que eu acho que seria muito importante quando se trata de financiamentos, que vai beneficiar também povos indígenas. Eu acho que, em vez de, no tema de compensação, trabalhar com as reparações já causadas pelas companhias dentro das comunidades, sem que tenha regra, sem que seja aplicado no modelo de colonização. Eu acho que eu vejo muita reclamação do não repasse dos recursos, e você imagina que isso não chega dentro das comunidades. É muito pior, e também não são informados dentro dessas discussões, só para enfatizar um pouco isso também e agradecer mais uma vez pelo espaço.
Um, and I think that instead of offsets, and to focus on a thought that I think is really important when it comes to financing that will also benefit indigenous peoples, instead of speaking in terms of offsets, we can talk about reparations from the impacts that have already been caused by corporations in the territories and communities without it being implemented in a colonizing way as it has been done in the past. I hear a lot of complaints about the lack of benefit sharing and relaying climate finance to indigenous peoples. So we have to pay attention to that and make sure that it actually reaches the communities at the end of the line, and that we do it in a way that benefits indigenous peoples. And so thank you for the space.
Thank you, Chief Ninawa, for your closing remarks. And in closing, I just want to mention that it's important to maintain our solidarity within our organizations. And we're here for a reason, and it's because of the solidarity that we feel back home as well on these issues. And we're being attacked from different types of ways in the streets now, in our communities, in our forests, in our lands. And again, I think that if we weren't here, this would be a total mess and just a circus of finance. And we've been trying to hold that at bay. So thank you all very, very much. And hopefully we'll see everybody in Berlin.
Thank you too. Maybe you just didn't emphasize the People's Summit.